Congress, Congress Park Neighbors RNO meeting. In case you didn't know, uh, Congress Park is all volunteer organization. We um, are a liaison between the city and giving neighbors a venue to bring issues to the city as well. Um, I want to welcome two new board members, Charlotte Redden, who's here, and John Hindelman. Both of them we welcomed to the board this month. They've been working with other neighbors on the overlay committee, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. Um, this meeting's being recorded, so you can go back. We have a different kind of format tonight. The first part of the meeting, I'm going to talk about the conservation overlay that a committee of neighbors has been working on in one iteration or another for the last couple of years. The idea for conservation overlay comes out of the East Central Area Plan and its neighborhood implementation of zoning proposals that are unique to neighborhoods. So I'm going to talk about that and the proposal we've come up with, presented to neighbors, and it is not final by any stretch. It's open for discussion. The second part of the meeting is going to be Rob Haigh
I
from
didn't turn it on.
planning, and he's going to talk about a new program that planning is implementing that
I think it's supposed to be turned on someplace else as well.
um, and that program is also addressing single unit, 2 unit, row house
Yeah,
zone.
there it is. Try that.
So our goals overlap. They're not the same, but um, plan planning will implement its plan
Thank you.
before we can make requests for an overlay. So for our discussion and questions that come up about the overlay, I'd like to postpone that until after Rob has talked about the planning side of things. Um, I know everyone's got feelings and opinions about preservation and the form that could take, but if everyone could just be patient until the end, um, we can have a full scale discussion about it. Um, so, Maggie, why don't we start the screen share and I will walk through the current overlay proposal. This has been developed from multiple directions, from multiple neighbors, from input from planning over a long period of time. As everyone knows, discovered Denver had gone through Congress Park right as the East Central Area Plan was completed and gave us a fabulous inventory of the existing architecture, the features, and descriptions of the buildings in Congress Park. Um, an overlay is a zoning code. It's not an HOA. It's not historic preservation. It's a definition of how things can be built. Go ahead, Mackie. Advance it. Can you move it? Um, Here we go. Maggie.
Where do you want it?
To the next page. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm on page 2 now. Do you want another page?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. So the overlay is divided into two parts. The zoning in Congress Park, there's basically three residential zoning codes. There's subsets within those, but there's single unit, 2 unit, and row house construction. As you can see, there's over 2,000 single unit and 2 unit um, structures. That part of Congress Park, we wrote a specific zoning code to go with. And you can see it here on the map. Um, the yellow part is all 2 unit, and the white part is all single unit housing. There were about 2,000 bungalows built in Congress Park between about 1928 and the early 30s. And those lie in that single unit zoning area. The areas that are historic, like 7th Avenue, specific buildings within Congress Park, would not be affected by the overlay at all. The next slide, Maggie. The second part of the overlay is, I'll go through the single unit, 2 unit. Um, the whole point of the proposal is to limit the scale and massing. So currently, under the code, a roof on a single unit or 2 unit can be 30 feet. Um, we have a proposal for having a pitched roof with a sidewall of 15 feet and allowing for a dormer to puncture the bulk plane and also limiting low sloped roofs so that they don't become a box and limiting that to 22 feet from the existing code of 30. Next slide, Maggie. We're asking for front porches. Front porches are common to most architecture, residential architecture in Congress Park, and it creates a continuity in the neighborhood to have a front porch overlooking a front pedestrian walk. And we're asking for a porch that's 48 square feet. The next proposal is the elevation of the first floor to 12 to 36 inches above grade. and that gives a front porch that overlooks the street and the sidewalk. The final element, next slide, thanks, Maggie, is a building material requirement for new construction that would require 60% of the front facade to be covered with brick and 40% of the side facade. All of this proposal applies only to new construction, as if you scraped or demolished a house, or if you were to put on an addition or pop the top of a house. Let's keep going down, Maggie. Um, the second part of the overlay involves the area that's around the outside edge of Congress Park, and that is zoned row house 2.5, row house 3. That area is an area that contains many of the oldest homes in Congress Park that many have been repurposed into multifamilies. And we broke that area off uh, and ask fewer things of it. In the row house area, we're asking for a front porch. Currently, the code does not require row house construction to have a front porch. So it requires a front facing door, but not a porch. And porches are common here. And we ask that any new construction in the RH zoning area have 60% brick facade on the front and 40% on the sides. So that is, as well as the elevation of the first floor to 12 to 36 inches above grade. These are common house forms in our neighborhood, and the committee felt it would bring real continuity to infill construction or new construction or remodeled construction in Congress Park. That's kind of the quick and dirty of the overlay proposal. Previously, to get the overlay approved, we have support of Councilman Haigh, and we would have to demonstrate neighborhood support as well by outreach, by surveys, by letters. However, and we'd have to have a discussion about each one of those proposal points to make sure that the majority of neighbors supported the zoning change. However, currently, planning has been confronted with many neighborhoods that are asking for similar things that we're asking for. Sunnyside, there's 7 overlays that exist in the city, and Sunnyside in 2022 was able to pass an overlay, and it was extremely arduous. It's expensive. It's a difficult process to go through neighborhood by neighborhood, and planning is confronted with all these individual neighborhoods asking for unique things. So Rob, I'm going to let you take over. And when Rob's done talking about what Planet's doing, then we'll open it up for discussion. Okay. Thanks for coming, Rob.
Of course. And thank you, Vicki. I'll start sharing my screen. Um, as Vicki introduced, my name is Rob Haigh. I'm a senior city planner with Community Planning and Development. I am the project manager for a project that is just kicking off called the Unlocking Housing Choices. Um, this project has some similar goals to the overlay. However, in many places you'll see it doesn't go as far into the details of updating design standards and those types of changes that are desired by the conservation overlay. And we're not going to pretend that it does. Uh, Josh Palmieri, who's also on the call, is a member of our project team, also a senior city planner with community planning and development, has been working with Vicki and John to talk about some of the proposals in the conservation overlay. And we met last week to talk about the interaction of these two projects. And again, as I said, we're not going to pretend that this achieves most of the goals of the conservation overlay. However, there is a fair amount of overlap, and enough so that that the changes that this project is um, going to propose citywide, from our perspective, it makes a lot more sense for this to come first, and then the overlay then kind of takes it from where this project leaves off, and then could potentially kind of go and take those further steps. However, because of some details that I'll go over in this presentation, we think that this is kind of the sequence that makes the most sense, and kind of sets up the neighborhood for the most success so that there are not, we don't cause a bunch of conflicts within the code itself. So I'll just introduce this project and just kind of recognize that it's kind of its standalone thing, and we'd be happy to if anyone wants to be involved in the project, and I'll kind of talk about where we are in that process as well. But this is a project we're calling Unlocking Housing Choices. The goal of the project is to improve the attainability and housing diversity in Denver's neighborhoods. So the project is actually what we call a text amendment. It's an update to Denver's zoning code. The code is what establishes things like setbacks, maximum heights, what you can do on your property. This won't rezone any property, but it would change what might be allowed to happen on certain properties within the neighborhood. This project will advance recommendations in plans that articulate the vision of things we've already heard from the community. So in Denver's citywide plans like Blueprint Denver and Comprehensive Plan 2040, as well as the East Central Area Plan, we're taking what we've heard already from that, and that is kind of the impetus of this project, and kind of that's our foundation. So one of the issues we're trying to address is that in Denver, the majority of housing units, when you look at the actual like individual units, 42% of those are single unit homes, single family houses, and 48% of those are large apartment buildings being 10 or more units. There's a very small percentage of what is called middle housing, and because it's a small percentage, it's often called missing middle housing. That's a phrase you might have heard before. Um, and it's generally what we consider this 2 to 9 unit development, in cities like Denver and throughout the country. So at a nationwide level, that cohort of housing, that middle housing, makes up 50% of the multi-unit housing in cities across the country. Where in Denver, it's less than 20%. So this is a valuable housing type that we've heard in our plans that is desired by communities, and kind of that's part of the goal of the project to allow those in more places in the city. Because currently they're not allowed in many places in the city. So this map on the right highlights where it's illegal to build anything except for a single single unit dwelling. This is kind of what we call our single unit zoned property, or our SU districts, if you're familiar with the code. But because so much of the city's land is kind of really just set aside for this type of housing, it really makes it difficult for the city to provide as much housing as is needed as the city grows. So I've used this phrase a couple times, missing middle housing or middle housing. And again, this kind of makes up this whole housing cohort between 2 units and 10 units. So it's duplexes, triplexes and fourplexes, some courtyard buildings, these kind of collections of single or attached buildings on a single lot. And then there are some larger types of this too. And depending on kind of where in the city, in what areas are zoned, they might only be, we might only really be looking at duplexes and triplexes in certain neighborhoods, and in other places, kind of these bigger options. So don't get scared by this whole gamut. This is not kind of what we're trying to shoehorn in. A big part of the project is trying to allow these housing types in a way that they fit well within the character of a community. And that's a good segue into the plan guidance. So Blueprint Denver is our large kind of overarching land use and transportation policy document. It's a plan that was developed with lots of outreach with different communities through the city in 2019, or really started in 2018 to 2020. And there's a very clear policy within this plan that directs us to integrate these missing middle housing options into low and low medium residential areas. So we'll take a look at what that means in just a second. But the plan also directs us to do this through a holistic revision to the zoning code at a citywide scale. And so that's kind of why we're doing this across the entire city at this point. And we think that the Congress Park overlay makes more sense to kind of build on this rather than coming beforehand. So if we look at Congress Park kind of more specifically, and that plan guidance said low and low medium areas. So what are those? So you can really see that this is an excerpt from the plan that shows where these low and low medium residential areas are mapped. And so you can see kind of the majority of Congress Park south of 13th Avenue and north of 6th is within this kind of lighter straw colored, that's our low residential area. And then the low medium is kind of what we step into as we get closer to Colfax up to the north. Additionally, this is from the East Central neighborhood plan. The description and the definition of low residential single unit places within Congress Park are described as being predominantly single unit uses on smaller lots, which we totally expect will continue, with 2 to 4 unit missing middle housing integrated. It then goes on to say that some civic and institutional uses would be allowed, but within the description of the plan that was adopted with this community's input, this is kind of how this type of this area in this straw color was described. So again, we're kind of building on that guidance to provide guidance and kind of how we're implementing this project. Another policy within this East Central neighborhood plan states that we should encourage preserving buildings in low residential places and expand missing middle housing options in neighborhoods. So this plan then goes and gives further guidance into things that we should consider and be very careful about while we're implementing this project. And undertaking this effort. And this is where I think we'll start to see some overlap with the conservation easement that Vicki was talking about. Because first and foremost, this plan directs us to look at design requirements to ensure that new construction is compatible with unique setbacks, heights, massing characteristics of the East Central neighborhoods. So that's kind of where we think that there's a lot of overlap here, and we can kind of take what this community's input is and kind of what you'd like to see and kind of add that to what we're hearing from other neighborhoods. And as Vicki mentioned, that there are other neighborhoods who have voiced similar concerns to us about our code and kind of what's being built and how it interrupts neighborhood character. And that's something that we're going to try to address through this project. But Even though the goal of the project is slightly different than the conservation easement, there is this significant overlay that we want to take advantage of. So some of the potential outcomes of the project would be allowing these additional housing options, right? Most likely 2 to 4 units within Denver's lower scale neighborhoods like Congress Park, and doing so in ways that incorporate that design and fine tune our building forms so that these new buildings don't interrupt the character. We're going to explore potential on-site affordability requirements. We are definitely focusing on promoting the maintenance of existing housing types, right? So we don't want to see, full neighborhoods scraped and things like that, which is very unlikely in kind of any case in Congress Park, but it's something that we're gonna study the market and make sure that we're not kind of opening the door for developers to come in and do that. Um, and then kind of to get at this point that I've been trying to make this whole time is that we are part of this project, and a key part of it is to take a look at our building forms and really understand kind of what we can do to make sure that these new housing options don't interrupt, don't harm the character of existing neighborhoods. So some of this interaction with the overlay, this project, UHC is what we call it, Unlocking Housing Choices, will update what you can build in single unit, 2 unit, and row house zone districts, which make up Congress Park. So by completing this project first, there's less possibility for conflict in the code, less requirements to go back and change things that were in the overlay that then would need to be updated then to kind of align with citywide changes that were made. Also, citywide projects sometimes have the tendency to kind of have very ambiguous timelines, but our timeline is pretty firm, and we're targeting completion by the end of 2026. So I know that was a lot of information. Vicki, I'll send this PowerPoint presentation to you so you can disseminate it amongst everybody afterward. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has, and then I've got our contact information in here too.
That was great, Rob. I see a lot of overlap.
Mhm.
And I'm very encouraged about the desire to have forms that integrate into the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Could you talk about how who's going to, as I understand it, there's an advisory committee. Can you talk to me about how that's going to work?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So we are in the process of setting up our advisory committee. We received over the month of May. We sent out our interest form and heard back from about 180 people and are going through that right now and are setting up kind of like quick interviews, meetings, just to kind of to finalize that group of people. Um, uh, and then that group will be kind of assembled by the end of the month, and we'll kind of meet with city staff throughout the project to help us develop and then refine kind of the strategies that we're going to bring forward. But it'll be about 20 to 25 people, representation from different neighborhoods, as well as council and our planning board, um, uh, uh, to to work as that advisory committee.
How are you going to do outreach to neighborhoods about specific choices that
Great question too. Yeah. So just like this, we're meeting with everybody we can anytime we get invited to RNOs. We're coming um, uh, uh, to to make folks aware of what we're looking at doing. We are having the advisory committee. We are also planning on setting up focus groups. So with different registered neighborhood organizations, groups of architects, home builders, advocacy groups for different interests. and also planning on having kind of open community meetings, a couple rounds of those throughout the city where we'll kind of either break the city up geographically into quadrants or something to that effect where we'll be able to kind of reach as many people as possible. We also plan on having a newsletter with surveys and polls to kind of get kind of the general public's input as well. So hopefully lots of input.
At the end of the process, will it act just like the overlay situation where only planning would bring it to council and council would approve the amendment? Is that
That's correct. Yes. So at the end of the process, after the input from all of the community and kind of us working to put together our proposal, we'll bring that to City Council again at the end of 2026, and Council will vote to adopt or not adopt the proposal. But we hope to, we'll be working with council throughout the process as well. We've already had meetings with them, and we have council representation on our advisory committee. So most likely, kind of the project will morph over time, and to be sure that we have something that can be adopted once we bring it to the council.
who on council is working on the committee?
Our direct representatives on the committee are or will be uh, Councilman Flynn and Councilwoman Torres. However, that being said, we're also already like kind of having regular briefings, and we have joint meetings and there'll be info items with council as a whole. We plan on bringing this more than once to the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee meetings for council. So there'll be other larger council representation, but the board or the kind of specific representatives are Flynn and Torres.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Kelly, I'll get everyone to. Kelly, you want to ask a question?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My question is regarding the planning presentation. Um, my understanding is that you're going through this review of seeing if you can implement middle housing. But I'm not sure if it has been determined like to what level of what type of residential building is being considered for that Congress Park neighborhood in terms of like fourplex, or because it went from 2 to 9
Mhm.
units. Has there been any determination in that, or the height? And then my second question is, how does that tie into the historic preservation sort of
Component.
component of the city is also like looking into, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, most likely, and you're right, none of this has been determined yet, right? We haven't really even launched our advisory committee to start meeting with people yet. So, but the plan guidance that we're kind of starting from directs us to look at 2 to 4 units in within the East Central area, so including Congress Park. So it will most likely be options within that range. And our as far as like the your question about size or height, it's our goal is to allow these multi-unit housing types as like house-sized and house-shaped structures that just happen to have more than one housing unit. So we're looking at kind of ways we can tailor our building forms so that they better fit in the neighborhood. Because something that we've heard now is even when someone builds a new single unit house, a lot of times it's so much bigger than kind of what's next door. So we're kind of examining that. So we don't know what the height will end up being, but I can say with a pretty good amount of confidence that it will be either equal to or lower than what you can build today.
Okay,
Charlotte,
great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Charlotte.
Yes, hi. Um, I was looking at your map of the majority of Congress Park being on your map as a single unit. And I was just wondering if you had looked at data, or if you will, to notice that in fact, even in what you had marked as single, there are a lot of duplexes, there's
Mhm.
fourplexes, there's a lot of um, what the can't think of what the right word is, but where there's basement apartments,
Mhm, mhm. You're absolutely
there's carriage houses, there's a lot that is
Mhm.
actually already existing, and
Mhm.
so we're already more dense than you might think, just from thinking of what parts are of, single family,
Mhm.
single houses on this one or two lots. So I'm wondering how you can take that into account. It's kind of like our reality, it already includes a lot of this middle housing,
Mhm.
really does. And if you were to walk this neighborhood, you would see what I'm talking about. Part of these were houses that were converted like post-war, post World War II,
Mhm.
and they have that extra unit in there already. Um, and that's my question. Are you aware of
Yeah.
that, and how can you take that into account without assuming that where it says single, it
Mhm.
really is single when in fact it's not?
You're exactly right, and you point out a great difference that I think we'll be highlighting throughout this process is that there's a difference between what our plan guidance says, right, which is kind of like lays out in broad strokes the kind of general character of a neighborhood, and then within that, then there's the different zone districts, right? In zone districts, a lot of times, particularly like in this area, they might say this area is single unit zoning. However, as you pointed out, there are many instances where there are duplexes and fourplexes and additional units, either as an ADU that's detached or in the basement or what have you. And we're very aware of that. We've done mapping and GIS, geographic information systems analysis of kind of where those additional units are. And we also have looked back at historical zoning and land use patterns across the city. And what you pointed out is a great point that neighborhoods like this kind of evolved naturally over a large period of time. And people had the flexibility to make changes to kind of address maybe what economic needs or familial needs that they might have had in their house, whether they needed to build a mother-in-law suite and separate it from the rest of their house, or they needed to divide the house up into more pieces to kind of help make ends meet, or they built an ADU in the back to kind of add some extra income over time. And these were all things that were previously allowed in the city, kind of in a lot of different neighborhoods. And then at a certain point, zoning stepped in and said, "Hey, we're gonna just freeze this whole thing in amber and not let anything change anymore." And it stopped that kind of natural, gentle evolution over time, and also stopped people from having the flexibility to kind of help them remain in place in neighborhoods and things like that. So a lot of what we're doing is reintroducing what used to be allowed in neighborhoods. It's and we're kind of reintroducing that ability for people to kind of address the needs that they might have on their property without having to leave. It helps people stay in place. It helps people address, issues with, their children coming home or wanting to live in the neighborhood, or any number of things that, I couldn't possibly imagine. But you're exactly right. We're one of our goals is to re-enable all of the different housing options that for a very long time were allowed in the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, I think you were next.
It wouldn't unmute me there for a second. Sorry. Um, yeah, I'm wondering, because you're suggesting that this unlocking housing choices plan go first, and then you're saying that um, the Congress Park overlay could come second and sort of fill in the design blanks. Is city council on board with this, or are they going to look at this and say, this is already mostly covered by the unlocking housing choices things, never mind?
That's a great question. We haven't had that conversation with Councilman Hines yet. Vicky might be able to fill in the gaps there more, but yeah, that's a great question, and you did characterize kind of our approach appropriately there too.
I'm exceedingly optimistic.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
I
We
think
see we see where exceeding optimism is getting us lately.
I think I want to say that John and I had this conversation with Rob, and I guess I'm hoping throughout the process that what makes Congress Park will be part of the dialogue that informs the choices of the proposal. So,
Okay, great.
John,
Hey, Rob, I may have missed this
Mhm.
comment. Is this effort happening throughout the city or just in the SUTU RH context?
It is happening. That's a great question. It is happening throughout the city. However, it is most of the changes will be made in those zone districts. That being said, if there are changes that are made to certain building forms that maybe also are allowed in an MU or a multi-unit zone district or something like that, then yes, those changes will be carried across and made in those areas as well. But the primary focus is on those SU, TU, and RH zone districts, since that's the plan guidance that we're kind of using to as the foundation of the project.
Okay, and the 2026 timeframe,
Mhm.
which as we were talking about it before, it seems like a pretty aggressive schedule. So is this, do you see this, and Josh can weigh in as well, as more of a series of tweaks to the current code as opposed to a comprehensive rewrite for these contexts? Or how far do you think this is potentially going?
That's a great question, and I think it might I would like to think of it as a more let me let me give you a really soft answer, and it's a comprehensive system of tweaks. I think we want to address the whole problem that we're trying to address it in one move. It will not be a drastic change in these areas. So in that effect, it will kind of be a tweak, and like if it's going to change, a use that's allowed, because it's going to allow, a couple more people to live in a structure in one area. So it's like a pretty small change, but and we're gonna like make small changes to the height and the setbacks, or so it's like if you think about it like that, like you could probably break it down into a series of tweaks, but we hope that it kind of comes together to be this comprehensive change that again accomplishes our goal. So yeah, great question. I think could become clearer in a couple months. And you're right, it is a pretty aggressive timeline. But yeah, we're hitting the ground running in June or July, with the task force. So we're excited about it.
Thanks.
Mhm.
can I ask a specific gen specific general question?
Okay.
There's been discussion about lot coverage, and in Congress Park, even though the code allows larger ADUs and other forms of infill housing, the lot size and percentage of lot coverage set a limitation. for good reason too. Um, is percentage of lot coverage up for discussion?
Yes. Yes, it is. We don't know what it'll do or what it'll change, and it probably will change differently depending on the lot size. But yes, it's something that we've already started talking about as a tool to help um, address those character issues with what gets built and how it fits in with neighborhoods.
Wendy, did you have another question? Thanks, Rob.
Of course.
I
I
did. It's
actually,
it's
I
kind of
have a question too. I'm sorry, it's Nora Kelly. I'm not able to raise my hand, but I just wanted, before you move on from Rob, I had a question for him. But if Wendy wants to go ahead, that's fine.
I have a quick question here. So I just wanted to clarify that when you talk about low and low medium, you're talking about density. Is that right?
That's a great question too. It's kind of a lot of jargon. So when we say low and low medium, what we're talking about is the plan guidance within, let's say, the East Central Area Plan. There is the whole scale of different levels of how future places are described or places are described. At the lowest end of that spectrum is low residential, low medium residential, medium high residential, and then it gets into kind of more mixed use types of development. So when we say low and low medium, we're talking specifically about that kind of where those place designations are mapped in our adopted plan. So if you were to look at the East Central Area Plan, you could see exactly the areas that we're talking about. And I know that's confusing, but another answer to your question would be like yes. We're we're talking generally about that's kind of what it means to say.
Yeah, it seems to be correlated with density.
It really is, yeah.
Considering that that is the case, then what kind of things are you going to be doing to um, accommodate parking needs? If you're going to be increasing the number of people living in a building, they're going to probably have cars because that's how we are out here in the West.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something that we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to address through this project. And as you saw in the when where you might because there was a lot of writing on the screen when I put this slide up, but it is something that the plan tells us to address or to consider as part of this. So I can't say what the solution will be or if there will be a significant change in parking requirements, but it is something that we're going to be talking about throughout the project.
And what was the thing that we saw recently, Vicki or Maggie, you might remember this, where parking requirements were removed from recent development permission?
So if this I can answer that. So if
Oh, thanks.
there's a current a text amendment to the zoning code similar to this one, that if it passes would remove parking requirements for the majority of new development. So if that were to pass, then there are unlikely to be any requirements for on-street parking with for any kind of changes that we might make.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Nora,
Thank you. Yeah. Um, because of the uncertainty of what you're doing, Rob, and the fact that it seems like every week or month we see a scrape off and of some nice older bungalow. Would it be possible for us to work on the conservation overlay contemporaneously with your work on your project, just so that if it doesn't pass, that we can step right up and propose the conservation overlay, or if it does pass council, then we could supplement it with the conservation overlay.
I think that would be something for you all to decide whether or not you'd like to do in the meantime. I think as far as working on it at the same time, I don't see any reason not to, as Vicky said, I think that working with the council member at this point will be pretty important to kind of, especially as we're working on this project, and he's aware of this project that that we're working on, to continue coordinating with him. But certainly that's absolutely something that you all could decide that you would want to do.
Okay.
Nora, let me respond to that. We're at a point with the overlay proposal that we need to start spending quite a bit of money to do outreach. And by that, I mean mailings, flyering, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
The hesitation I have is that some of the things in the proposal that we could get bogged down in deliberating to become
Mm-hmm.
completely moot because planning will say we want a front porch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not guaranteeing that. No one can say that. But I think moving forward, uh, the board was discussing sending a survey out to neighbors with the specific proposal ideas we put forward and getting
Mm-hmm.
feedback about how people are feeling about it, along with the presentation that Rob just gave. Do people understand it?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to underwrite the exact code that we're talking about putting an overlay on. And
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Hines has pushed me very hard to work with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, outside of getting feedback from neighbors about
Mm-hmm.
their understanding or concern or suggestions, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's only so much farther I can go until
Mm-hmm.
planning makes a move. Do you agree with that, John?
And you mean until planning makes a move? What do you mean by that, Vicki? I'm sorry.
Well,
I
whatever the plan, they they have
uh-huh.
support on council.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume what they come up with, council will adopt.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, yes, if it falls short of something that the neighborhood would like, then absolutely we can move
Mm-hmm.
forward. And that would be part of the process of
Mm-hmm.
doing some surveys. But rather than sending out, it costs 5 grand to do a mailing. And
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
before I do that, I think I should be as clear on facts of this is possible. This
Mm-hmm.
probably is not. Um, Planning is planning to do outreach, and
Mm-hmm.
all these questions can keep moving forward. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't think we're going to get council support until this is resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And planning will do outreach, but they don't really need a majority of the homeowners, do they, to approve of what they're working on? Am I
They
right
need
about that?
approval of council,
Just council. Okay.
and council has constituents.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah,
Did
and in the
that help?
final, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
Well, in the final analysis, council's holding all the cards. So whether it's the
Mhm.
conservation overlay or the housing committee, what's
Mhm.
going to be taking place, it all has to go through council. So
Yeah.
I don't see, and what I've heard is that, and as I think was mentioned earlier, there are a
Mhm.
few neighborhoods in town that are working towards similar goals that we've been
Mhm.
working toward, but that
Mhm.
council has kind of positioned themselves as like, okay, look, let's get this done. Let's focus on this.
Hmm.
And then, as Vicki said, once that becomes codified in whatever form, final form it is, then
Mhm.
the RNOs, if they don't think it's gone far enough or there's something that they'd like to back out or add in, then they would entertain that process. But yeah,
Mhm.
they they don't necessarily need, I'd like to say that the East plan that was done several years ago, there was a lot of neighborhood conversation interaction that formulated that plan.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think the reality is at this point in time, they don't really need the neighborhood to
Mhm.
buy in. They'd like it.
Yeah.
But our process is, again, I understand it to
Mhm.
be, we need the neighborhood support. Anything that we want to do as an RNO,
Mhm.
we need to run it up the neighborhood flagpole and
Mhm.
hopefully get a majority of buy-in that then we can go to Chris Hines and to council and the powers to be and say,
Mhm.
we all want this.
Yeah.
Now what?
Uh-huh. Yeah. I suppose what we could do is at least educate the neighbors so that when it comes about, not the overlay, but
Yes,
the neighborhood plan, that they will hopefully understand it and accept it, and then we can, if we need to
right,
fine tune it, then we can start in.
right. We
Mhm.
have a hand up over here with a phone number. Um, please introduce yourself and you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Ryan Campbell. I've been in a couple of these before. Rob, great presentation. My question is for some of these missing middle, do you get the sense that those would be rentals or properties for sale? Or do you get the sense from like developers, they'd kind of just get snatched up by companies and flipped or turned into rentals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're not making any requirements on either side that they be for sale or for rent or anything unless there's some type of affordability component at a certain level or something to that effect. However, especially with like things like duplexes or either like a fourplex or row house type thing, which again might not be what ultimately ends up in a lot of Congress Park, but they're easier from what we've heard from developers, easier to sell on like a fee simple type setup because they kind of are owned from the ground to the sky. So it's probably more likely that there will be more for sale multi-unit building types in this project. And that's one of the things we hope to unlock. Um, is kind of like some smaller for sale products, but there's no requirement. If that happens, it will just be something that we are targeting just because it's naturally something that happens with these housing types. But great question. We are also kind of looking to see what we might be able to do because there are some concerns that we've heard and that we have about private LLCs coming in and buying up large amounts of property in the city. Again, whether or not we're able to address that through this project, because this project is focused on the zoning code, I can't say. But that is something that we're looking at, and we're going to see if there might be a strategy that we can employ in this project.
Gotcha. So in other words, like a deed restriction is out of scope, but kind of like in your expertise, bringing up the zoning code for these small units is one of the tools in your box to address affordability of new ownership.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, these from what we've seen statistically in other cities who have done projects to enable these housing types, they generally see more for sale type products on the market that are more affordable for younger buyers, first time buyers, and things like that, just because of the
Like myself.
yeah, we're spreading the land cost over, a couple units and things like that. So there are some advantages like just kind of that happen naturally. So that's what we would hope to take advantage of. But yeah, great question.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Hmm.
Do we have any more questions? Rob, thank you. Wait, there's one more here. No, I guess.
I think that was the gentleman who just asked the question.
Yeah.
Was
Um,
yeah,
Thank you.
of
This
course.
will be an ongoing discussion. So please keep us in the loop on updates with progress. And we will do a survey, see what people understand or don't, and try and increase awareness about
Great. And I will send you that presentation, and I'll also send you along with that, it'll have a link to our website where people can sign up for our interest form, which will just kind of be someplace you can sign up to be aware of, any community meetings we might have, interested in like a newsletter where we'll send out surveys and things like that so that folks can continue to be involved. But thank you so much for having me.
That was great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I just have a couple quick announcements. We are going to have our ice cream social on August 1st. So please mark your calendars and plan to sign up to be a celebrity scooper at that event. And there's other volunteer opportunities for helping with the kiosk boards, keeping them cleaned up, and delivering papers. So if anyone has time, please feel free to contact us. Thank you, everyone, for coming and your time tonight. Please feel free to reach out to the RNO with any questions you have, and we'll follow up with a survey on this. So thanks, everyone. Good
Thank
night.
you.